The state of the Union has changed dramatically since my boyhood in the coal fields of West Virginia. I grew up in the Depression years and came to Washington as Harry Truman was leaving office. I've seen America in distress, and I've seen us at our best, innovative, forceful, generous. I've learned a thing or two about the greatness of America and what holds us together. I've learned how quickly adversity strikes. The stock market crash of '29, Pearl Harbor, the death of John Kennedy, and how our country struggled back each time to renewed vision and strength. I've also learned that predictions of the future more often bear the glitter of hope than the tarnish of reality. Tonight, House Speaker Jim Wright and I will take a look at the State of the Union from a different perspective. We will explore what government has done and what it must do in the future. Our assessment of America would be tougher than the president, but it's anchored to the same faith in our people and the same hopes for the future. I'm a Democrat whose politics were shaped in an era of hard times, from the small world of company stores and coal mines. Back then, my foster father earned $2 a day as a miner. Our life was as spare as it was close-knit. As a small community, we hung together and endured. We had our disappointments and our sorrows. There was no such thing as unemployment compensation or Social Security. Our horizons were limited and our choices were few. I graduated as valedictorian of my high school and was lucky to get a job pumping gas at $50 a month. But out of that grim time came a president and a government that lifted the spirit of America. Never before or since has this nation been galvanized by such force. We came out of World War II with a new confidence and a new promise. For the first time, my people, working people, had some security against deep poverty. We had better working conditions in the mine. The elderly didn't have to turn to their children to take them in. Looking back, we did the obvious. We rose to the crises of our time. Yet, for me, the images remain. And with them, the truth that government is best measured by how well it responds to the people's needs. Since then, I have watched this nation and its government seek its way through a changing maze of economic and political circumstances, from Medicare to the Great Society, the anguish that was Vietnam, the arrogance that was Watergate, and the promise that was Camp David. And then dawned the Reagan years and the profound experiment. If the Roosevelt and Truman presidencies were born of necessity, the presidency of Ronald Reagan was born of ideology and a technicolor view of America and our people. It opened with the promise to get government off our back. It offered the mystical formula of supply-side economics, which claimed that a huge buildup in military spending and enormous tax cuts for corporations and the rich would lead to a balanced budget in 3 years. It was an administration that sought to make us feel good with images of mourning in America. It was a time when the president and his presidency became separated in our minds. As a man, Ronald Reagan has withstood physical pain with grace. He has carried the nation's grief at times of loss. He has always been at ease with his beliefs. A man who can touch the nation's humor and make us feel better than we sometimes should. As president, his greatest victory has come at the negotiating table. The arms reduction treaty, though limited, is a milestone on the road to a safer world. But his political victories have not always been national triumphs. The dark side of the Reagan years has only begun to loom. Instead of a balanced budget, he has presided over a doubling of the national debt in 7 years. Our record budget and trade deficits, once just abstract numbers, have now forced the government to default on its most fundamental promises, like education and health. We have surrendered economic leadership in markets around the world. Our nation has been sharply divided on the question of Central America. The secret arms for hostage deals stand in direct contradiction to our given word not to deal with terrorism. The cases of cronyism and abuses of power for personal gain continue to mount in Washington's courtroom. We've come to the end of an era. The feel-good slogans have gone flat with time. We've learned that bravado is not leadership, that ideology is no substitute for common sense. The time has finally come for us all to face the hard truths that once gave us our self-reliance and our world leadership. Hard work, on the job and in the classroom. Pay as you go. No free lunches, no running away from the bills due. Helping those in need, but not those with greed. It was right here on the Senate floor that Congress worked with Franklin Roosevelt to help to end the Depression and to win a war. It was right here that Harry Truman's request for the Marshall Plan was answered, where John Kennedy's space program became a reality, and Lyndon Johnson led the campaign for equal rights. It is right here the government has had some of its finest moments. This is where we faced crisis head-on, where the institution rose with the nation together. We've done it before, and now we've got to do it again. We've got to educate our children better than we do. We must have a system that not only launches the most gifted, but lifts the horizons for the least well-off. More than the number of missiles and tanks, the number of well-educated children is a truer measure of our national strength and our potential. Every moment we wait is a fraction of our future loss. We've got to pay as we go. We can't go on borrowing, especially from foreigners. They're after short-term gain for themselves, not a long-term investment in America. We've got to depend on ourselves to work out a sensible balance between spending and income. The President has to work with Congress, not wait until 3 weeks after the fiscal year deadline and a stock market crash to finally sit down with us. The recent budget summit should have been called 7 years ago. We've long understood that line item vetoes and balanced budget amendments are no substitute for national will. To palm off our debts to the next generation must not be an option for our own. We've got to make America free from fear. The fear of a lifetime of savings wiped out by catastrophic illness, or the dread of foreclosure on a mortgage, or the shame of having an able child cut off from college. Too many of our people are still slipping through the safety net, unknown and unprotected. We must reduce the incidence of killer diseases like AIDS and cancer by multiplying the nation's research. And we ought to demand safe passage on our streets and in the air. And we've got to sharpen our competitive edge. It's a shock to be told that America is no longer number one around the world, that our products are increasingly outsold, that our manufacturing jobs are shipped overseas. Regaining our leadership rank among nations presents our people with an enormous challenge, and government has a big role, not to subsidize industry, but to give American producers and exporters the best advantage we can, to improve our highways and our ports, to encourage productive investment. The face of my hometown in West Virginia has changed a great deal since the Depression. The little house where I was raised is gone. A lot of the mines have closed down, but we still hold to the old values, born to this country long ago. And we still remember well when government acted to give us the leadership and the hope and the tools to rebuild. we still marvel at what we've achieved when government has been both America's sail and her keel, when we have driven ahead but stayed clear of the shoal, when we've been guided by common sense and simple trust and vision. We've done it before, and now we've got to do it again. As Speaker Jim Wright will explain, we've already made a strong start.
We have indeed made a very strong start. I'll tell you about that. But first, I want to say congratulations to President Reagan for having successfully negotiated the INF Treaty with the Soviet Union. We pledge him our support in that endeavor. 6 months ago, President Reagan and I joined together in calling for a new peace plan for Central America. A few days later, the 5 Central American presidents agreed to move that peace process forward. They are still actively pursuing. Mr. President, as long as there is any measurable progress toward solving that conflict at the table, I think you and I should give peace a chance. In national security and the pursuit of peace, there really ought not to be any Democrats or Republicans, just Americans. Congress has supported those goals. We provided some $300 billion last year for our military defenses. But we know that no democracy can be a first-rate military power if it becomes a second-rate economic power. As important as our commitments abroad may be, our first obligation is to the American people and to their future. Today is the day America looks at itself in the mirror and asks how we're doing. So consider the state of our union with me, if you will, as we reflect upon 5 major steps the 100th Congress is taking to build America's future. House Bill number 1, our first legislative act, was the Clean Water Bill, to protect the one precious resource upon which all human life depends. Because nearly 1 out of every 5 public water systems are now contaminated by toxic wastes, we simply cannot delay the cleanup any longer. Yet President Reagan vetoed this bill. He insisted that we cut back sharply on America's commitment to clean water and a safe environment. Fortunately, Congress overrode that veto. House Bill number 2 was the Highway Bill, to improve and upgrade the network of highways and bridges on which Americans depend. You know that 30% of the bridges in this country are unsafe? Thousands of them built more than 100 years ago. President Reagan vetoed this highway bill also. He mistakenly called it a budget buster. Well, that was absolutely incorrect. This bill doesn't add a penny to the national debt. We pay for these highways with our gasoline taxes. They make up the Highway Trust Fund, where billions of dollars lie idle. And so we overrode that veto as well. House Bill 3 was the Trade and Jobs Bill. Mr. Reagan said a few days ago in Cleveland not to worry about the trade deficit, that it was a sign of strength. Well, just ask the local people who worked at the Dalton Industries or at the General Motors plant near Cleveland, both of which just closed. Those people just lost their jobs to the trade deficit, as millions of other Americans have done. In spite of what the President says, the trade gap has risen sharply every year for the past 7 years, and it was higher last year than ever in our history. This has made America the #1 debtor country in the world. That isn't a sign of strength. Our bill does 2 things. First, it provides incentives for other countries to abandon unfair practices which discriminate against American goods. Things like deliberate red tape, which keeps American import applications just permanently understudied, never activated, or like unloading a shipload of 200 American automobiles, just 1 car a day. We simply require in this bill that other nations treat our American products on their market just exactly as we treat their goods on our market, no better and no worse. This bill also strengthens our ability to compete. Tools and schools. It will improve our research and development, modernize America's aging industrial plants, equip America's workforce with the skills and knowledge that we need, so that unemployed industrial workers aren't forced to settle for lower-paying jobs. See, we can't build a vibrant economy just by delivering pizzas to one another. So while this administration has crossed its fingers and hoped for the best, the Congress has acted. We'll send a bill to the President shortly, and we earnestly hope that he signs it. House Bill number 4 is the housing bill. In the last few years, the hope of home ownership has become a fading illusion for too many American families. President Reagan asked that we abolish the Federal Housing Administration and that we increase the price of houses by charging hidden user fees. But we saved the FHA, outlawed user fees, and protected home ownership, not just for an affluent few, but for Americans of average and modest means as well. We also passed a farm credit bill to stop the epidemic of family farm foreclosure. And for the growing number of men, women, and children who have fallen victim to that sad new phenomenon of homelessness, our bill reflects our belief that there's no excuse for any American to be abandoned by his country just to die of starvation or exposure to the weather. I've always believed in an 11th commandment. Thou shalt pass on to your children a better world than you received from your parents. And it is to them, America's children, that the great thrust of our legislative program is dedicated. House Bill number 5 is an education bill. 5 years ago, the administration's own commission produced a chilling report on the sagging quality of American education. The report was called A Nation at Risk. Now, the president ignored that warning. And every year of his presidency, he has called for major cuts in education. Last year, he called for a 28% cut, including, believe it or not, cutting the appropriated funds for drug education. And he proposed abolishing vocational education. Now, this goes beyond just foolhardy. In an age when our children will have to cope with semiconductors and super colliders and international competition, America just will not survive unless the next generation is better educated than we were. Education must be our first priority. And so our bill increases our commitment to quality education for the first time in 7 years. And if it is disastrous to equip our young with inadequate learning, it is immoral to burden them with our financial debts. The policies of this administration have added more to the national debt in 7 short years than all of its predecessors added in almost 200 years combined. A great nation like ours shouldn't be forced to borrow from foreigners to pay our bills, or to lose 24 cents from every one of your tax dollars just to pay interest on the national debt. In the year ahead, your National Congress will complete this agenda that we began last year for a stronger and more humane, more secure America. And if the President will help, we can do it all on a pay-as-we-go basis and not just keep adding to the debt. Mr. President, we all have to work on this. The ancient scribe wrote, "Not thine to finish the task, but neither art thou free to exempt thyself from it." We cannot solve all of our problems by January 1989, but that doesn't mean we don't have to try. Senator Byrd?
The Speaker is right. We must work together. These are the times when we must take our measures and gather our strength. These are the times when we must reach for the steel that has been ours for generations and sharpen it. There are the predictions that we've flattened out and that we've lost our fire, but we've been tested before, and each time we've come back stronger. Over the last year, the course of America has begun to change, right on this very floor. And each of you, in your own way, from your own neighborhood, has adjusted our direction by a fraction. You've become a consensus for openness and caring and balance. You have asked government to build and not to tear down. And we have begun. The laws that we have passed in the chamber are not just promises. They're not just the rhetoric of what might be. They are the building blocks for what is to be. They are the working parts of our society that have been hammered out by compromise and consensus. And each of you has left a mark on the books. Together we have committed government to help rebuild America. Together we have begun the job. Together we will finish it. Good night. May God bless you, and may He continue to bless our great country.